Hi, good morning. I'm Tania Brown. I'm the Senior Manager within the Expatriates Unit at Identity Malta. And basically, we would like to share with you what our processes are like. The most common pitfalls that we might come across that might help you not do them. And obviously, we'll take it from there. So, the remit of the Expatriates Unit is basically processing of the legal migration process. When we talk about legal migration process, we're talking about people who come here at will, who come here for work purposes, who come here for other purposes, who come here to join their family members who are working in Malta, and so on. So we basically issue both work permits and other residence permits. What is loosely referred to as an ID card is actually not an ID card in the case of expatriates. It's actually a residence card. So when we ask for a residence document number, this is what we're referring to. This is residence card, residence documents. And I'll go on to explain what the difference is, because obviously EU nationals exercising their treaty rights basically get a residence document because they do not need a permit to stay in Malta. I'll start with EU nationals, which is obviously one of the biggest cohort within the gaming industry. As we said, there's the freedom of movement of EU nationals, which do not necessitate them to ask for permission to come to Malta, live in Malta, work in Malta. However, national legislation does mandate that if an EU national stays in Malta more than 3 months, they should be getting a residence document. This obviously gives them a number of rights. For example, earlier this year, we saw a big influx of EU nationals who had been here for quite a long time, some of them, asking for the residence document because they needed it to have their vaccine processed, their government vouchers, some of them as well. So that's what we had a huge demand earlier this year, and that could have led also to some delays for which we do apologize. There are no applicable fees for EU nationals, except if a document is lost and it needs reprocessing, or if a document is damaged. To apply is quite easy. First of all, you just send an email on eu.ima@gov.mt specifying if you are renewing the document number, that is the number ending with an A, if you already have it in hand, the former one, and your immigration status, which means what you are doing here in Malta, whether you are studying, whether you are in employment, a family member, self-sufficient, etc. Identity Malta usually replies to such emails, unless we have the influx I was talking about earlier this year, within 24 to 48 hours, and gives you an appointment for the biometrics and the picture process, and the checklist of documentation. On the date of appointment, especially during COVID times, it's very important to be on time, because obviously we're trying to minimize the social contact that we have within our premises, and to bring all the documents in original format, as well as a copy. And it's important to always bring a passport with you. This is one of the pitfalls, actually, people coming in without a passport, because I have an email, and it's not enough, really. We do need a passport, because it is the main form of official documentation that we request from everybody. If you lose a card or change the address, there is a very simple process. A change of address, you just send an email to the same email address that you apply for. Then basically we send you a reply with an appointment if your card has been issued for over 2 years. If your card has not been issued for over 2 years, we just send you the card. We just send you a collection letter to collect your cards. So there's no need for fresh biometrics to be taken. This might change depending on EU regulation, because there's currently discussions underway that require us to do away basically with biometrics, with the retention of biometrics after a number of months and not 2 years. So this might have to change in the future, and unfortunately we have no say about it. If you've been here for over 2 years, then obviously you'll need to come in. If you lose a card, it's always important to report a card within 3 days to the police and come in with, just come in, there's no need for an appointment for that. Just come in with the police report. So it's important that you always report a lost card. It is an official document. Now, non-EU nationals, that's where the process starts getting a bit heavier, as you probably all know, but over the last couple of months, we've strived and we did our utmost. Maybe COVID was, in a way, a blessing in disguise in this area, because it mandated us to go, online, fully online, much faster than we had envisaged originally. And obviously, everybody remembers long queues at Identity Malta, which we all hated. I come from the private industry as well, so I hated it back then as much as you probably do. So nowadays, everything is pretty much online, and people only have to come once. They don't have to queue because they have a set appointment. They come once for the biometrics. Now, online applications for non-EU nationals do not just include single permit applications. They also include self-employed sometimes, they include family members and other residence permits. I'm happy to say that in the last couple of weeks, we've actually gone online with all those applications, not just the single permit, but also for family members, for study, for medical reasons, and whatnot. We can only process an application when the applicant holds a legal status in Malta. And this always comes back with, what does a legal status entail? A person who is a non-EU citizen can only be in Malta if he has or if she has a visa covering her stay, or if she has a valid residence permit. Now, one of the biggest issues we always have, and this has been especially prevalent during COVID times, because obviously it was difficult for people to travel back home as easily as they used to. It was very difficult for them to come back as well. So these are the main issues we've been seeing with people falling in an overstay position. For example, people who lost their jobs, and it took a while to find a new job here in Malta, and they couldn't go back home to regularize their position. Now, we've done a lot of work with the immigration police here, because obviously holding a legal position is a mandate of the Immigration Act in Malta, not of Identity Malta, where a lot of persons who fell into this conundrum of having lost their jobs, found a job after a while, were actually regularized and were allowed to stay on in Malta and reapply for a single permit with their new employer. But it is very, very important, especially now that traveling is becoming much, much easier, and we're kind of moving back to pre-COVID times, to help your employees retain a legal status in Malta. And this means renewal should be done on time. I'm coming to that later on. And if somebody loses his or her job, we help them in processing things fairly. If we are engaging somebody who has lost his job and coming to us, it's in your interest as well as the employees to apply as soon as possible, submit the documentation as soon as possible, and so on and so forth. The process is easy. It might look a bit cumbersome when you first start registering, and we all agree that, sometimes navigating new online systems, especially, and registering for new online systems, which are governed by high security controls, because obviously this is an official document, it can be cumbersome. But once you get the hang of that and once you start applying for new people, then it's pretty straightforward. You just enter the details of the person, upload all the documentation, and submit. The single permit gives an individual, whom we will call the applicant, both a residence card and a work license. So basically, we do the legwork with Jobs Plus as well. Ideally, if it's a new applicant, the application is done whilst the applicant is still in his own country or her own country. So there's no need for the individual to come to Malta until the process, the due diligence process at the side of Identity Malta is carried out. The duration of a single permit is, first of all, it's a temporary permit, and the duration is often of 1 year. There are instances, depending on the job designation and the income, where, and most importantly, the national health requirements, especially now, where we would not be able to issue a longer residence permit, even though it is in everyone's interest to actually issue longer residence permit where applicable. For high net worth individuals, which this industry is actually filled with, there is the Key Employee Initiative. It is a fast-track initiative. It also allows persons who do not require a health check on an annual basis, and that is something that would need to be checked by the individual on the public health website. In that case, we can obviously give a 3-year permit. Just to let you know, Key Employee Initiative applications usually are issued within 5 to 10 working days, so that is quite a difference. Renewals can be submitted again, must be submitted on time. They can be submitted up to 3 months in advance. At the moment, one of the major changes we're doing in our system is to allow us to send you automatic reminders upon, the time, when the time for renewal comes up. So this would be helpful to you and to your employee. If a health check screen is required, and that is usually a stumbling block, only up to 30 days in advance before expiry. I don't know whether there are any questions at this point or whether I should go on, because I don't want to break up the session. So there's a change of employer. This is an area where we notice a lot of different opinions, a lot of different ideas about how this process works with employers. And it's something we'd like to clarify. We like to clarify with all industries, actually. Now, when a single permit is issued, it is issued on the basis of a specific designation with a specific employer for a specific period of time. Should one of those criteria change, that is, job designation changes, employer changes, or the validity expires, then that residence permit is no longer valid. So even if the validity of the permit, for example, shows that it expires in January 2022, but you're changing your employer in October 2021, in that case, you need to change your residence permit. Your new employer needs to apply for a new single permit. That new single permit will be issued with, and again, another duration of 1 year or 3 years as applicable. For a change of employer to effectively take place, there needs to be a termination form from the previous employer. Now, this is mandated by employment law, for which Jobs Plus basically are responsible. And what this means is the employer, the previous employer, is rubber stamping the actual date when the employment ceased. Now, why is this form and this date important? Should somebody be in more than 10 days overstay following this date, they require to leave the Schengen area because they would be in breach of Schengen regulations, basically. It would be irregularly, rather than illegally, staying in Malta. So this is why we are saying, please, new employers, do submit the paperwork on time so that your new employee would not need to leave the Schengen area, because that is when applications are not accepted, are considered inadmissible, basically. The online process is, as I said earlier, a pretty simple, straightforward one. Any paperwork sent from Identity Malta is sent via email to the email address of the employer, to the email address of the employee, but it's also available online, on the online portal. And aside from the employer, each employee has access to his or her own application. Basically, that's done through a link that is received upon the submission of a new application or renewal application. And it remains valid to review the full, the progress of your application throughout the single permit online process. Now, I'd like to go through what we do in the background, because obviously we do appreciate that sometimes it takes a bit too long, maybe. It can seem bureaucratic, it can seem too lengthy, we're not giving enough information, maybe we're not giving you the information you want to hear, and that is, I do understand, it can be frustrating. Now, once we receive an application, the first thing we do is validation of the documentation uploaded. Now, I don't know how many of you have tried this process with us. I believe most of you are non-Maltese nationals, but I don't know how many of you are actually non-European nationals, so I don't know how many of you have gone through it for yourselves or your staff. The validation of the documents means that each document is checked not just from our side, it's also checked by our stakeholders. So there are around 3 to 4 filters of checking, including the police, and when I mean the police, it means the immigration, Interpol, security services, and other branches within the police. And then there's also Jobs Plus from the side of the employer, where Jobs Plus actually vet not just the employee, but also vet the employer. When documentation is not submitted in the correct format and as requested, and we do have guidelines on our single permit portal to guide people what they should be submitting. In that case, the process is stalled, and we keep toing and froing between employer, employee, Identity Malta, and whatnot, or sometimes, Jobs Plus come in and request more info and more info and more info. It's very important that, and even if you have questions, because we do understand that it can be a bureaucratic process, it can look like a bureaucratic process. But if you have any questions on what is being expected, all that you need to do is send us an email and we'll give you a template, a format, a point-by-point reply on what is required. And that way, you can use it for all other employees in the future as well. So, once an application undergoes the entire due diligence process and is approved by all relevant stakeholders, we issue what is called, and this is issued only for still abroad application, what we call still abroad, when you're applying for an employee and he's still abroad. We issue what is called an approval in principle. And this approval in principle allows an individual to travel to Malta by first going to the visa office in his or her own country and applying for a visa if a visa is required. If the individual comes from a visa-free country, then they can just proceed to Malta. It also irons out questions at border control, basically because they're coming in from outside Schengen. And it is a time-barred document. Usually it gives an individual, we've lengthened this at the beginning of COVID actually, because we do understand that it's become very cumbersome to travel around. So it's basically 6 months, I believe, 6 months for the acquisition of visa and 3 months to travel to Malta. Unfortunately, although we'd like to do it and we are actively considering going into some form of exception there, but these approval in principles are not extendable. And there's a reason for that, because obviously they are aligned to the due diligence process. They come as a result of a due diligence process which might expire. So at the moment we're talking with stakeholders to see how we can basically take into consideration further delays due to global travel. Once they come to Malta, before I go to family members, because I think most of you are more interested on work permits anyway, once they come to Malta, or when they know that they're going to be in Malta, and provided they don't have to stay in quarantine, please encourage for your applicant to set up an appointment online. All the information would be on the approval in principle. Once they come for the biometric appointment, they can immediately start working with you. So there's no waiting for the actual card to be issued. Upon attendance to a biometric process, they are issued with what we call an interim receipt with a stamp that they can actually work. So they'll be legally working here. You can send off the engagement form to Jobs Plus immediately, and it's not an issue. So this was I believe this was one of the questions that Heidi also mentioned. I might be actually mixing industries here. But we've received this particular question several times and from several industries to where we're asked, but we have to wait for the card. No, you don't have to wait for the card. You can engage them as soon as they land into Malta, come for their biometric appointment. So it's a get-go. As I said earlier, we also issue residence permit that enable a worker here in Malta to bring his or her family members with them. This obviously, we see it as an advantage to employee retention, which we understand, can be an attractive matter. We've also gone over and above the directive at Identity Malta, issuing a new family members policy as from the 1st of May, pushing down the eligibility criteria to enable more and more workers to be able to bring their family members. Now, family members means spouses over 21 years old in a monogamous marriage and unmarried minor children. So, stable resources are one of the primary criteria, but obviously, we can make this available through HR Connect, actually, and there's a link on our website where you can see the salient details. Lead times and behind the scenes were two major questions that Heidi had when we spoke. Now, lead times is depending on various criteria. It depends on the application type. As I said, key applications are actually fast-tracked. Within 5 to 10 working days, you should have the approval in principle in hand. Completion and clarity of documentation provided. Applicants' immigration status. This is why I wasn't very insistent earlier on keeping an individual legal in Malta. And that onus is actually on the individual, but obviously you as employers, it's important that you help out. And due diligence, how long does the due diligence take? Sometimes it can take a couple of weeks. There are reasons for that. Sometimes we're not even privy as to why it's taking that long by one of our stakeholders, but there are reasons for that. And family members' applications will take obviously longer because they can only start once the sponsor's permit has been issued. I've gone behind the scenes, so I will not repeat myself because I know this can be. Again, permit holders' obligation slide just goes through the obligations. It is also important when changing an address to inform Identity Malta. This is national law, unfortunately, and anyone changing address does need to inform us of this. Non-EU nationals can risk also losing their residence permit if the address is changed and we are not informed. We don't enforce this too much because we do understand mobility of a person, of an individual, and especially in uncertain times, but it's important that you take it under advice. This function will also be available online in the coming days, actually I believe this coming Monday, so it's even easier to do that. One of the major, obviously, stumbling blocks that affected every process in Malta, not just Identity Malta, but every industry, every employer and employee in Malta is COVID-19. Whilst we have never stopped, there were instances where we could not process visas, obviously, and here our colleagues at the Central Visa Unit really helped a lot because they were issuing permits from our end instead of the country of origin when we had whole countries under lockdown and unable to open visa offices. We do offer a restricted service from the visa section, actually, to offer what we call a premium visa service.
It's considered on a case-by-case basis.
Exactly, and depending on which country they come, because of national legislations over there. Yes. One thing which we keep coming across is the quarantine and health regulations. Health-related regulations, unfortunately, do not fall under our remit, and they have been one of the most restrictive areas, unfortunately, for applicants who had approval in principles in hand to come to Malta. Unfortunately, we do understand why these regulations are in place, and we do offer advice on how to, best make use of an approval in principle letter coming to Malta, notwithstanding, and not bypassing health regulations. So if you have any concerns of this nature, or you need some advice or some, tips on how to do, how to bring your new employees to Malta, please do give us a call, give us an email. We prefer emails, and there's a reason for this, not because we don't like talking to people on the phone, but because working as we work in the expatriate section, we find that emails clarify issues when there's especially language barriers and maybe, not just language barriers, but culture barriers as well in some cases. So we find that email works best for both parties. So drop us an email. I'm going to put our email addresses here at the back. I'm sorry, they came really small. Lead times for response is generally 24 working hours. Sometimes we would be experiencing high influx. At the moment, we are experiencing, again, a high influx of applications, especially work applications. And I'm saying this, obviously, we are a bit restricted, as Heidi said, and as I made it clear earlier, about divulging numbers, but we are experiencing around 200% to 300% increase in work applications from every sector, not just the gaming industry, from every sector. But this is also a good indicator, and I'm saying this because I do understand that every industry needs to feel comfortable about what other employers in Malta, what the business sector in general is doing. People are in demand. There's a resource pool out there, outside of Malta. I heard part of the talk before we started. It is important that we make it attractive. And obviously, we try to do our bit. Obviously, as a regulator, we are fenced in by regulations. But if you have questions, if you have suggestions, please do feel free to forward them to us. Thank you.
Tania, you make everything sound so simple.
Everything is.
Maybe we can all get your hand to hold throughout our processes. But you're only one person.
Exactly.
And Simona is only one person.
Yes.
Guys, just having you coming here, sharing this, and I do think that you covered a lot of the questions that I actually shared.
Yes, I wish I could cover more, but obviously.
We all wish, but
Yes.
just again, having you here today, I see it as a first step on a relationship that's going to continue build.
Of course.
With the help of Gaming Malta and Ivan, we will get there. We might also get to the independent feeling of we can do these applications all by ourselves, knowing exactly what's needed.
Yes. I'm sure that the gaming industry is not one of the industries that have a lot of problems. Actually, you navigate technology pretty well.
Quite well.
So quite well, yeah. Probably better than us. So.
To be honest, I have to give you the eloge of the online processes, and maybe that's due to COVID, but I myself, I had to update my address, my physical address, and that was extremely smooth.
Great.
Yes, but work-wise, we will get there. I am absolutely sure. All right, so what I want anyone that has questions to reach out. Maybe I can be the first one. I'm always taking the first questions. It's rude of me, but I'm going to go. Okay, so basically what we're saying, like from our end, have our papers ready. Everything should be like quick and clear as...
A valid passport.
Valid passports.
That's also another pitfall we find.
Yes.
People come with expired passports or passports about to expire in a month or less sometimes, expecting a 1-year residence permit. That's obviously not going to fly. So they don't need to have valid passports. Passports are 10-year documents. So.
Okay. Note taken. And also what you're saying, like we can really help each other out by really terminating our ex-employees in terms of permits.
Let's put it this way. Terminating them is the end of a relationship. Engaging them in time is the beginning of a relationship. Just make it a good one. So that's one of the secrets of retaining employees. Don't give them hassles when they come on board, like, oh, we'll do it tomorrow. No, because there might be a stumbling block. At least start off the application, and if that individual doesn't have the health check certificate in hand, just leave it pending until he does, but, and then upload it within a few days. But at least ensure that that individual is given the chance to remain legal in Malta, because it pays both employer and employee.
Yeah.
So,
exactly, and I'm going to say this, and this is not coming from you guys, but we have a lot of companies that actually are so employee focused and want to retain staff, even if they leave their own company, that they actually say, stay with us until everything is sorted on the new side. So that's another thing that I know, I'm not putting you into this.
No, we've seen this. We are aware of this, actually.
Yes.
A lot of other
Would
industries
you say it's okay? We should actually promote it?
Yes. If you are, still retaining an employee, it's always good to end the relationship on a good note as well, not just, begin it on a good note. We're seeing it a lot because employers are more understanding of the current circumstances, especially that they allow an employee or a soon-to-be former employee to get his paperwork in order with his new company and whatnot.
Let's call it karma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That employee might come back, actually.
Exactly. And then you don't want to be the one that picked them
Yes.
up. Questions. I know that there is a lot of questions. You guys know that there is a lot of questions. Now, what are the questions to ask? Do we have any questions on the board? Nobody dares now. It will come to you via email, as you want it. Or how long are you guys staying? I know you have very busy schedules. Yes. All right. So mail Tania, mail Simona after this. Mail Ivan. He loves emails. He's super quick on acting on emails. Let's have a break. Let's mingle, and then we meet here again for the second panel. That is, again, hosted by Viviendo. They have a raffle, so put in a business card or something to get you have a chance to win a chair. The second panel is about hybrid, remote working, and how are we actually statusing ourselves right now? Cool. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Give a big round of applause. Thank you.